Okay, so this is the next rusty spot I'm going to dig into on the passenger side. This is called the door hinge post bottom, and it's actually several layers of metal. Let me show you the other side because it's in good shape, and it'll give you an idea of what that once looked like. Now, the driver's side, not too bad, a little surface rust. I don't think any of that will go clean through. And note that it has like this sort of indentation. That should be for the earlier cars for the charcoal canister. The hoses to run down the side, go through that sill plate triangle. This is a sill plate, and then they would pass through here. Would have been a couple of holes, and then the charcoal canister would be in the fender well. Well, so anyway, that's the reason this is different shaped than the passenger side. So going back around, passenger side, you can see it's pretty much squared off. It's got a little slope to it. But what has happened here, if you'll remember, at one point this car was retrofitted for AC, air conditioner, and that is always an aftermarket solution. Well, they ran hoses down underneath the sill plate, and they cut holes. Well, you can see where when they come in here with a hole saw, they dug into the outer longitudinal piece, and those hoses being in there inside of that captured a bunch of dirt and salt and crap and started that corrosion, which, you know, I mean, it's going to rust anyway because it's not galvanized metal, but that certainly didn't help. So anyway, this piece, both sides, the door hinge plate bottom is available from Restoration Design, and I will in all probability buy that because it's a pretty complex piece of metal. It you can see right here where it laps over, and then I'm going to have to get this off properly, I'm going to have to get rid of all this seam sealer and find the spot rivets to get that off properly. Anyway, the wire brush will reveal everything. There's one of the spot rivets way up in there. So let me start brushing on it. Anyway, once I get this off, then I'll have to deal with the perforations in the outer long itself, and that'll be a patch. And then get that kind of squared away, and then I can put this second piece of metal over the top of it. So here we go. I got most of it with the big cutoff. Finished it up with a body saw. Let's see what we got underneath here. Well, yeah, got some dirt in there. A patch will work. The problem is this contour. I might be able to replicate that, or maybe just flatten it out where it's flat all the way across here. You know, come up here, square it off. Instead of drilling out the spot welds, I'm just going to get in here with a grinder and grind that layer of metal off right there. Just clean all this up. And it wraps under here. Yeah. I should be able to remove that either with a grinding wheel or the floppy grinder, which removes less metal at a time. So let me clean all that up, see what we got, and then we'll look at making a patch for that outer longitudinal. All right, so getting a little tricky here. I got that bottom door hinge plate segment removed. Got it cleaned up pretty good here where the spot welds are. However, you can see there's been some perforations that have opened up. That's in the outer long, so that clamshell wraps and joins the inner long along this seam. So I've replaced the whole outer long, and it's a major deal. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So right now I need to focus on my patch here. Another interesting thing is these two little indentations in the outer long are there to drain the water that gets sandwiched between the door hinge plate bottom and the outer long. And so those clogged up as well. And that's the reason this corrosion, in addition to them gouging the metal with the hole saw. So all kinds of carnage in here. Let me get out a straight edge and mark a cut. I think what I do have to keep in mind is that the door hinge plate lower segment actually comes down and wraps underneath here. So you have another layer of metal, which I took off with the flapper disc. So if I'm on my patch, if I wrap this, I could potentially join it. There is another extra piece of metal in here, which I'm about ready to open that up and show it to you. It's part of the fender, I believe. So that may be where I can tie in my patch for the outer long. All right, let me cut away this bad metal and then we'll look inside of there. So we've cut a rectangular section out of the outer longitudinal, and then you have this piece of metal, which goes, I don't know if I can get that on in there. It goes up, and it's the same as the fender. So that's one continuous piece that wraps all the way back into the longitudinal. So we've got some rust perforations there. However, there's no way I'm going to get in there to yet the third layer of metal to try to fix that. So what it's going to be is a patch for this rectangle, then the piece from Restoration Design, which is the lower door hinge plate, and that will wrap under. There'll be spot welds underneath here, and it'll pretty much cover these perforations. So all this gets treated, and if there's any little perforations left open, it'll get seam sealer. So let me get the metal treatment on it, start cooking off that rust, then I'll prime it. I don't know if I'll get to this patch this evening. If not, we'll pick it up Saturday, and I'll have to order that part from Restoration Design. Haven't ordered anything for this car yet, but I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to. Okay, we got the metal treated and weld through primer on. Hopefully this will help, and we'll pick this back up on the weekend. Thanks for watching. Yeah, a little chilly in the garage today, but it'll be all right. So I've got this prepped out. Like we were looking at on the last video, there's a contour up here, like a rib. So on my patch, I've kind of bent that to match. And as I'm welding that in, I can actually kind of beat it to conform with a hammer. So making these patches, just so everybody has a clear idea, you know, I rough in a piece of metal and then just go back and forth to a grinding wheel to kind of trim the edges. That's the best way I've found. It works better than trying to trim it with a body saw or something like that, because you're just taking little bits, little slices off. So I think I got a pretty good rough start. Now on the bottom, I'm going to tack it all the way around and then take my hammer and then roll that bottom edge, because that metal along the bottom is super thin, and I'm going to try to lap it over, roll it over and lap it, and then dress it with a grinder. Because bear in mind, we got that other segment that goes on top, that door hinge plate lower piece. So also I need to get on the back side of this and prep it with weld through primer, because I want everything in that rusty hole to have primer on it. Slow that rust down as much as possible. So I do my first weld on that high spot and then start pressing it in to conform, you know, using a bar or something to push it down, working away from that high spot. My fit right here isn't that good, so I'm going to take my body saw and stick it in that little gap and just trim that to where I can press that new sheet metal in there and get it to mate up. So I got that one edge cleaned up and a spot in there and rolled the bottom over. Probably won't be able to get a lot of welds on the bottom edge because it's super thin metal. But again, we have another piece going over the top of this. So that's where I'll really concentrate on getting those bottom welds done. And it laps almost over that rust spot. So I think this is going to be fine. I'm going to go along and finish welding all these seams, and then it'll be a matter of getting that next part, or the first part, for this car. So that turned out all right. I was able to get 4 spot welds on that where I rolled the bottom over. This side here, that next piece will lay on top of it, and I'll spot weld it. So I'll probably have to grind that down some more flush. On my welds, I prefer to leave a little, especially near this really thin metal, because you end up shaving metal off on either side, and I think it just makes it worse when you take those welds down to flush, and there's no need for it on these chassis parts. Nobody's going to be looking at this, and especially on this piece, because you got another piece over the top, and then you have the cover on the outside. So main thing that it's structural. You killed as much as the rust you can. You put primer over the top of it. That's the way I look at these patches, is stabilize it, make it structural, move it on.